can start whenever you like, my friend.
Start. I actually looked up. We are like, we're on 37. 37 for one season is great. That's a good odd number to end on.
Yeah.
37. Is that a prime number? I don't know.
I think so.
Might be. Either way, prime numbers are good to add on. I'm gonna make that little rule
And
up
3
right now.
plus 7 is 10, which... Do it again.
It's
Which
not
we
a prime
are.
number.
Season 2 will come.
Exactly. It will come. It will come after the holidays. Things are going to be a little bit sporadic as traveling and semester ending stuff for me and all that fun stuff gets crazy, and then we will kick back off with some wild interviews and more Knob Creek and all that fun stuff. Or less Knob Creek. Whoever gets us sponsored first, though we will take Knob Creek if you guys are listening.
It's true.
So.
It's true.
It is true.
It's a fine bourbon.
It is a very fine bourbon, which I partook of. What was it? I want to say Salinger, but that's the author of Catcher in the Rye. But it's all, well, maybe it is that because it was a rye bourbon and it was delicious.
Oh, nice.
Holy cow. That was.
I had some Eagles Rare recently again, and I was like, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Reasonably priced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course,
Generally. Yeah.
we're changing the name of this podcast to Wood Bourbon Barrels.
Well, there is wood, air, and metal in the bourbon
That's
barrel construction, so maybe we need a bourbon barrel guitar. There
How
we
many
go.
people do we have to say will buy a batch from us if we did like a blend? Do we need
I
like
don't know.
Do we need like 1,000?
But I guess it's all
Would
depends.
100 be enough?
I don't know. But you have a major announcement.
I do.
Basing it off of ordering a custom guitar.
Oh, I did put a sizable chunk of money on getting a custom guitar made. Custom
Yeah.
archtop.
Yep.
Finally time to join the archtop world.
Mm-hmm. Not
You
only
know-
that, a very nice one.
As part of being a lefty too is a lot of people are like, why not just get like a Gibson or this or that? But it's really limited. It's actually almost impossible to find some of these things, even like Gibson L5 or something like that. One, it costs more money than the custom one I'm getting made,
Mhm.
and two, like good luck even finding a left-handed one. And
I mean,
I was talking to somebody, even like a non like a laminate top, which is like an ES 175. They're laminated. They're like impossible to find left-handed.
Hmm.
So, just in general, it's not like I can go, even if I wanted to, really with more commercial builders. So
Well, that's part of the problem. It's like, yeah, Gibson is huge, but you figure that lefties represent 10% of the population. And then how many of those are what percentage of that are guitar players? What
Yeah.
percentage of that are guitar players that would want to warrant spending that much money
sure.
on a guitar? So I get like the fiscal aspect. I don't like it, but I get it.
Yeah.
And so I do see them up on Reverb occasionally, like, because, I have my feed
Sure.
set for handed. It's part of my morning routine. Check the email.
How do you ever do anything? It's like you get stuck in those.
Yeah, that rabbit hole.
Sometimes I'm like, oh man. Especially if you haven't
Yeah.
looked for a while. So if I don't look, it's actually
Oh,
better
yeah.
not to look, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, there's like 7 new arch tops on here that I didn't see before.
Exactly. I have so many things in like my watch list that I just, I'm never gonna buy it. It's
Yeah.
not gonna go in it. But it's like, that is a nice guitar,
Yeah, right.
and I just want to like look at it. That's basically it. Yeah, that Paul Reed Smith, that lefty one is really cool. No,
Yeah.
I'm not paying that, but dang, that is a nice looking guitar.
Well, and you almost want them to be on there. It's like when you buy a house or something. You want the house to be on there long enough that's uncomfortable and you can actually get a good deal on it. Instead of,
Yep.
like if it just was posted, you're like, oh, there's no way they're going to take $1,000 less for that or whatever.
Yeah, generally, it's when I watch it and like I see the one guy like constantly shooting down, like this item because now
Oh,
they do,
it's
like,
right. It is
This item
17
has-
offers. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's good for business and it makes sense because you can see when something's gaining traction, but it's still annoying. Just be like, no,
Yeah.
no more offers. Everybody, just look at this guitar. Just that's all. Maybe I should screenshot them just to, and have like my wall of things that got away.
Sure. Yes, no, it's been interesting. We talked about it before.
Yeah.
And I talked to a lot of really good builders and just like really good people. And I guess the reason I went with the person that I went with, which I guess I'm debating whether I should say yet.
Yeah, that's why I haven't said anything. That's your call.
Yeah, it is just that it was just great, like feedback so far. I mean, when I'd write a comment about this, and then he would really like spend time even before it. And it was really like non-sales. He actually sent the letters to Adam too, and it's just like, here's all this information, like, oh, you're thinking about this, and here, oh, what about this, and like if you use this kind of wood, then it's like this, and if you use this kind of, it's like this. And it wasn't like he copied and pasted it and put it in there. It just felt like a really nice little relationship we were building before I even put money. And there was like zero pressure, like, oh yeah, you should send me money and we can talk about it more. He's like, oh, if you feel comfortable, like, because I had to actually inquire, like, how do you even start this and what do you need? So it's good. And then another thing I noticed is, like, in the archtop world, I'm gonna say that and this maybe is probably completely unfair, but there's sort of like the player level ones, and that's what I'm gonna say are like the sub, let's say, at least sub $10,000 range, which is much more where I'm at. And then I'm not gonna say they're not player grade, but it's like I'm wondering like what players are spending 20 grand on some of these guitars. I just don't know. And there's a lot of those too. And those were immediately off my list. Even 10 grand was way too much money for me to spend on a guitar.
And that doesn't always necessarily denote value to an extent. Like,
sure.
The one thing that you have to look at is if there were a newer maker, you could get like, a Ramirez in the rough, so to speak, like before he became Ramirez, or before Gibson became Gibson. In one sense, it's like those smaller guys that are just starting out, that are just kind of getting their feet wet. It's kind of like there's a chance to hit gold, and even the ones that are necessarily cheaper doesn't mean that they're worse to an extent. It's a real weird marketing / demand / all that stuff that drives up prices for guitars to astronomical heights. It's like I watching Guitar Salon's videos, which is they have all these classical players come in and play the instruments as promoting the player and advertising their own thing, which is great. It's a great, like, who doesn't want to get promoted and play $15,000 to whatever $100,000 guitar?
Yeah, sure.
But the ones that are like the crazy expensive ones are like, an 1888 Torres, or, the original ones that are more historical than anything else.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
Bad. But, I'd have to, like, their production value is great. Like, I don't know specific mics, but everything sounds fantastic. And, just watching John Marcel Williams play the couple of guitars, and since I'm acquainted with him, I just reached out and was like, "Hey, the video sounds great." He's like, "Yeah, it was pretty cool experience." And like the first guitar that he played was 15,000.
Right.
It's like zoinks, and then it just went up from there. Like, so it was just like, dang. And
I mean, when you look at the economics of working on, if you're a master luthier, which I think all the people we're talking about, they are, right? Like, that we've talked about, and they spent the better part of their life honing this skill. You'd like to think that they make well over six figures, right? Or at least comfortably in the six figures kind of area. And when you start doing the math on these guitars, it's like, well, then how many guitars do you have to build a year? You're a master. You're like one of the greatest builders in the world. You've spent all this time. You can't make six figures. I mean, if you sell them for $5,000 and you only make 10 a year, that's 50,000. You know, like that's not going to cut it, right? So it's not even Not to mention whatever it costs. Like the wood probably costs at least $1,000 or twice or that, right?
If that's the lower end. Plus, you have tools, which just like you can get obscenely priced guitar stuff, you can get obscenely priced guitar and wood cutting. I mean, wood cutting tools get obscene. Everything is like that. You know,
so I don't begrudge the pricing.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes sense, you know, if you're only making 10 guitars a year, and you're one of the greatest builders in the world. I mean, at minimum, you're charging $10,000, right?
Yeah, like at minimum. You know, and that's
the easy guitar, right? That's the easy with the I don't want to say cheap materials, but cheaper materials and not the most exotic whatever. Which probably don't sound that good anyway. But
that's the other thing too. Is just because it's exotic doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Or what's that one meme where it's got the picture of the fork that's all bent to shit? It's like just bent out of shape and everything. It says just because you're unique doesn't mean you're useful.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's like, you know, and it does prove a logical point. You know, it happens to be like just because it's a unique wood or a unique thing doesn't necessarily mean it's a great instrument. It can be, but also it'd be the complete converse. It's like, well, that was a mistake. That should not be done again. You know, it's like we looked at those $20,000 electric guitars, those German ones or whichever, Terce or something, starts with a T.
Tufnell?
Tufnell, yeah. Tufnell, yep. And,
but those are like works of art, right?
Yeah.
Like
but it's like you look at the guys that are playing them, and they clearly have money to spare. I mean, Billy Gibbons, he's kind of sitting. Right.
But there's a lot of like. All I can assume is that the players, because there's a few like high level players that play those. It's hard for me to imagine they spent $20,000 on those.
Mm-hmm.
They must have got a deal, I would think. It's I don't know for sure. But it's also too like there's a couple builders that they're very expensive, right? But they like, or even what was the best thing that like Linda Manzer ever did is give Pat Metheny a guitar, you know? That like set her entire world, like endless amounts of guitars she builds forever. Right?
Yeah,
because you put it in like a pristine like top level player's hands, and maybe it kind of stinks that you have to eat the cost on it or something, but that just means you have orders forever.
Yeah,
especially Pat Metheny, right?
Yeah, you're gonna get that, and that's just basic economics, you know.
And I don't know that he got it for free, by the way. I probably know he paid full price and etc. But still, like getting it to him, right, was a big move.
Yep, and it also could be you're risking the opposite effect of them hating your guitar, you know. And it's like, that was garbage. Oops, that's a reputational hit, you know. That's not good.
Well, I guess I'm suspecting that a lot of the, especially big, you know, somebody like Pat Metheny, people probably try to give him guitars a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. Or listen to this album or whatever. Oh, speaking of which, that reminds me, you also got a huge shout out by Ron Thau. Wow.
Ron Thau?
Yeah, it's Thau.
Jeez, you messed me up too.
See, I have that effect on people. But how did that happen? Like, did you reach out to him and say, hey, listen to my album, or hey, I just dropped this, or how did that go?
Yeah, so Ron, aka Bumblefoot, he's always just been like a super cool dude. Like I remember before Facebook days, there was a Bumblefoot forum, and this was before he was on Facebook too. Or sorry, before he was in Guns N' Roses. Because everything's Facebook. No, before he was in Guns N' Roses, before he really had like fame, he was in on the Shrapnel world, and he was pretty underground. But anyway, he was always really cool on the forum. Like you could, he would always comment, and it was a good forum that way. There's a couple that are like that too. I'm gonna sidetrack for a second. There's one like with Scott Henderson and Guthrie Govan and stuff that. Even now, some of those guys, it's like really easy to get a hold of them, and they sort of just never forgot. who they are. Now they might not be A-list celebrities, right?
Mhm.
Which is probably part of it. Like, can you send Slash a message? Would he get back to you? Probably not. But it's not because he's trying to be a jerk. He's probably gets 20,000 emails a day, you know, from people.
Yeah.
So it's just impossible. But anyway, Ron's always been just super cool. I did a cover of one of his songs.
What was it? Guitar Suck?
Every
Time I shake my head.
Every time I shake my head, it's like Christmas, which is a pretty fun little song. So you could look that up somewhere. And I did a cover of that. And then like he shared that too, actually. Incidentally.
Oh, really? Sweet.
Yeah, like I don't know. Whenever I did that song, and all I did was tag him in it. But anyway, for this one, I had sent him an email or a message on Facebook, and we'd actually chatted a little bit previously, but actually it was about the Christmas thing. I mean, that was years ago. And he was like, "Oh, thanks for doing." You know, we kind of went back and forth a little bit. But anyway, so I sent him a thing and said, "Hey, man, thanks for all the inspiration, etc. I know you probably get a zillion of these things, but I put this record out, and there's an album that I particularly like of his, which is called Uncool, which is like this I don't know, like it's almost like lounge music / like Bumblefoot. I don't know. And it's just cool. Like, and Ron's a killing singer too, and it's just this really cool vibe of an album. I haven't listened to it for a little while, but it's one of those, like, you know, there was just no handcuffs on it. And so the Red Side Visible album, that was the same way I approached it, which was no handcuffs. It was just whatever my musical whim was to go with it. And I think generally it was fairly successful in that regard. You know, where sometimes some parts of that have literally 100 tracks at the same time happening, you know.
Yeah.
It's like a choir and violins and 30 guitar tracks and, you know, whatever, and vocals. So, anyway, I sent that message and he was like, "Oh man," and then he actually sent me this little voice. I don't think I told you that. He sent me a voice clip and he's like, "Yo man, thanks for the message. I'm totally listening to it." And I could hear in the background him listening to Snap Crackle Pop.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, like, I don't know, a couple minutes later, I see Ron tagged you in this post or whatever. And so he shared "listening now," and he put, you know, they just shared the link to their Bandcamp page. And it was cool, you know. And then I saw, because of that, you know, I looked at Bandcamp, you saw like 50 people or whatever listen to it that hadn't listened to it before.
Hey,
so,
that
yeah, anyway, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, you know, that album's kind of interesting. It's sort of self-generating a little bit, which I don't think I've had one quite like that before.
That's cool.
A lot of the Mirth Collaboration thing, and then the Night Terror stuff, and PSI, and some of these other ones that I have out in the world. You know, I get little occasional bumps, and I'll see, you know, 5 people listen to it this month or whatever. But then the Red Side Visible one, you know, I get a continual, I don't know, 300 to 1,000 people listening to it every month in various different locations. So it's like, and a lot of times I'm not it's not like I'm generating the traffic. Like it's getting generated from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's cool. Or maybe it's even people just repeatedly listening to it, which is even better probably.
Yeah. I mean,
so yeah, it's kind of neat.
You never know how stuff will grow or who's going to listen to what and take that little thing.
Yeah, I think it's like the amount of effort that was put into that record, you can hear it, I think.
One would hope. Good Lord.
And I think people will appreciate, you know, like in a particular scene, appreciate that. So I could see it being shared, like, man, have you checked this out? It's kind of a weird record, but like, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff going on. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's one of those things. And I get, you know, sometimes I get really nice emails about it and stuff too. So anyway, yeah, it was really cool. Right. And, you know, part of that was Matt Hollenberg, who was one of our guests this year, right?
Yep.
We were chatting at one point, and he said some nice things to me about it too. And he's like, I think you should just be sending this to like people that inspired you. And I've been really bad about doing that. But so I did one. I did Ron. And then he ended up sharing it. So I'm like, oh, there's like a whole host of people I should be doing that to.
Yep.
And what's cool about Bandcamp, the reason why it's even cool too is like Bandcamp gives you codes for your records. So I think you can get like 100 per record that you can hand out. So I actually sent like Ron the code. I'm like, you can download this for free or whatever. If you want to, you don't have to. And no worries either way. Which is the way I took it. So yeah, it's kind of nice. You have so much for like press or giving out to whoever. So anyway,
no,
I've done that a few times with some different press things and stuff. But then so I still got like 90 of those to go. So you should use them, right? Like that should be the goal. You should use them.
Well, I mean, I think you got caught with a catch-22 a little bit because like you couldn't really tour behind it because nothing was open when it kind of came out.
Yeah. And also, I don't have 100 people to
yeah, exactly.
pull it up.
Yeah. That's the next, not the next one. That's always the conundrum of when you're on a smaller level in terms of being able to afford to pay musicians, and you have this incredibly orchestrated album, and you want to do it live. You're kind of like, backing tracks. It's like, oh, what's your solution?
It's interesting when you're younger. People, if you're in your 20s right now, like you should be bonding with your friends and trying to do bands, because the older you get, it does get more difficult. It's not that people don't want to play with you or whatever, but economically, if most of us in our like 30s, 40s, whatever, like we have families and stuff, and it's hard to take a gig when you're not going to get paid for it. Especially like higher level players, right? So it's not that people don't like you or something like that, but you only get so many like freebie projects where it's not like affecting the food that's going on your plate or to your family, your kids or whatever.
You have to balance. I mean, I run into that all the time. It's like I have a certain number that I don't move unless I hit that number.
Yeah, and there's certain like passion projects that you might do, but it's like you're limited to that, right? You can do a little bit of that, but it's hard to do that for every gig.
And the passion projects tend to be the ones that you do for yourself.
Right. Yeah, and at some point you got to be like, this is the one I have to do my passion project. Right? Yep. And maybe you have to give a little bit to get people to help you with that too, right? So that's where you always have that like 20% or whatever it is that you'll help somebody else's passion project with the hope that they'll help you with yours one day, right?
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, so it's tricky because like if I wanted to do a Red Side Visible show, I'd probably have to pay people because we'd have to rehearse probably 4 to 8 times or something before a show.
I think that's on the low end. I mean, no offense. I think your musical ability is great, but knowing the difficulty of the level with the music,
it really depends who is involved. But yeah, it would take quite a few people to get it.
And I think that's one thing that people don't see behind that curtain of not only hiring people to play the music, finding competent people to play that level of music.
Sure.
It's just like, this isn't, not that pop is generally easy, but it's not pop where it's like, okay, it's a chord chart and you can sit down and and just play the thing. It's more of, okay, this is, I can't sight read that. Like, I think there's maybe like 5 people on the planet that could. And so it's like, that's immediate. That goes into the payment for the practice time for the gig, because it's like, all right,
yeah, sure.
I got to sit at home and work this up. Then I have to do the rehearsals, and then the actual show, and hope that it pulls off during the show. It's like one of the things that's the most frustrated is because it's always a one shot, to an extent. When you're doing a gig and you're working up for it, it's like the practicing can go great, but none of that matters if it dive bombs on stage.
Yeah,
which is like the biggest fear, and that's honestly. If you knew that you were going to play at a consistent level, no matter what the environment was, you'd wouldn't have any potential avenue for nervousness to creep in. But when you're putting all this time into one show, it's like the one shot mentality comes off of that. It's like, I got one shot at this, and if this doesn't go well, I'm going to be really ticked because I've put in like months of work.
Yeah.
You know, and I went to that with the undergrad and my graduate degree. It was like all constant work to one thing, and then started again to one thing. Now, granted, before kids, I toured before those gigs, those recitals like crazy, just to kind of like, all right, whatever, this is just another thing when I got at my graded one. But
yeah, I mean, anyone who's gone on any kind of tour, and if you're lucky enough to do it with the same band, right, or whatever, like your first, even if you rehearsed, your first gigs are kind of like sloppy. There's just little things that happen on stage. Yeah. You're kind of like just sorting through stuff. But like that third or fourth gig, you're really starting to hit like all cylinders. Yep. You still have like that creative burst. You haven't repleted like every line you've ever done. Like in the improv world, it's like at some point when you've done 10 shows now in a row in like a couple weeks, you're like, oh my God, I hate hearing myself play. Like, why do I keep playing the same stuff that I always play? You know, I thought I had more in the bag or whatever than this. So you're like, God, I hate everything, and I got to go back and woodshed. Which is how you get better, though. Yep. But anyway, that it takes a couple gigs, right? But that like third or fourth gig, you're starting to play like really well. You know where all this, like especially like in my world, where like you know where all the pedal settings are. You know where the sweet spot on the amp is. Like where your finger, you know, you figured all that stuff out because you get better. Everybody gets more tight with each other, and all those little hits and stuff happen in better spots. So it takes a little while, regardless how good you are, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why Zappa would practice for like months.
And even when they do that, they practice for months. Go on the road. The first couple shows are still like, It wasn't until like the next week or whatever where they were like, okay, now we're hitting on all cylinders.
And that's like back when I would tour pretty prolifically. It would be like the first 3 shows would be local, smaller things, basically to do just that. Yeah. To be like, all right, I'm working out all the kinks. I'm getting used to the time. I mean, even like the timing of jokes, how I talk to the audience, like set lists and designing all that stuff. That all factors into how you're going to go about it. I mean, these aren't just like, oh, I just like show up and do this thing. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's so much behind it. Yeah, it reminds me, like, my summers used to be really packed. I would have 2 to 3 gigs a week almost through the summers. And even if they were different groups, it's like, man, you start to play well in a lot of ways. Like you're performing, like you're not practicing as much because you don't have time for it. Or if you're practicing, you're only practicing for those gigs. Yeah. But you really get like your like gig chops up when you play that much. Yep. And, I don't know how else you could replicate. You can't replicate it in practice. It doesn't work.
No, you can't. Well, it's like the
you can't even replicate it in rehearsal. Like, you play with the same people. Like you can't replicate it. So
it's just it's an energy thing. Like a live audience is totally different than whatever. And what to put it? The old saying. I don't know if this is a saying or not, but at least from what I've heard is like one gig is worth 10 practices.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree.
And it's like, it's so multi-tiered too, because there's the factor of setting aside the gig, but if one gig, you will practice more because you have a gig. So that's automatic. So you're already going to put...
Well, and you're practicing music. Yeah. Not like bullcrap, like spider exercise or whatever. On
exactly. Exactly. You know, and that's the thing that, like, for myself, it's like no gig, technique comes in. Gig, switches, you know, and I keep the technique going just to keep my hands loose. But like, so you have all this other stuff that you're doing ahead of time to prep for that gig with that aim, and that's motivating. And then you get to the gig, and that additional pressure of having a live audience and potentially a one shot with it, like the amount that you glean from that show versus everything else is tremendously higher, and it's extremely valuable. Right. And the more that you do it, the more it just kind of like, so it builds that resilience, performance resilience within yourself, you know. So if you're not getting out there and taking your knocks, you're never going to be able to take a punch, and you're going to screw up on stage and fall apart. You know, where even everybody screws up on stage. Everybody does. Like, I don't care how good you are.
Yeah, of course.
You're always going to have your own being like, that didn't go as well. And where the audience, it might be clueless. But to you, you're hearing things that they're not picking up on.
Sure.
I was just saying that.
That's 98% of the gigs.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like, I was just telling a student earlier today, I'm like, when you record yourself, it doesn't lie. Like, you're going to hear back every little flub that you're looking for. And that's great. And it also sucks because you're hearing all your mistakes. And especially if you're critical, you're going to be sitting there going, no, God, why did I do that? You're going to really take hard, and then you're going to want to.
Isn't it funny? Like, I've been trying to figure this out. Why is our it's not even, I don't even know if it's real-time analysis, but it's like, why is our real-time analysis not very good? Like, why didn't you know that, like, doing that didn't work, or the timing was weird or something like that when you were doing it? Because when you listen back, like, I know this is where the real-time analysis thing's weird, is that you're like, you listen back and you're like, instantly, like, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
So, like, why didn't you, when you were playing, go like, that doesn't sound good? Like, I don't understand why we can do that.
Maybe there's a limit to how many things we can keep track of.
I guess, yeah. There's definitely a limit to how many things I can keep track of.
Yeah, well, to everybody, we all have limits. But so I think, like, when you're playing it back, you don't have the it's playing to keep track of at the same time. Obviously you're listening while you're playing, but you're not completely engaged in listening as you would be without your guitar.
Sure.
Like, you put a guitar in my hand and it's like a bomb could go off next to me. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, and I don't know how objective it is either, right? Like, I'm reading this Michael Brecker biography, which I pretty much finished last week. There was a new biography, Michael Brecker, if you don't know him, is like basically after Coltrane in the tenor world, he was probably the next biggest name. And anyway, just total monster musician, right? And like, it's all through the book. They're just talking about how Mike would show up at these recording sessions and just hate everything. Or like, there's a Herbie Hancock's, like, they did a group together, and he's like, Mike would come off stage and just be like, I'm sorry, man, I totally screwed that up. And Herbie's like, dude, what are you talking? Like, that was incredible, like, unbelievable. Yeah. And it's like, Mike's just like, I'm really sorry. Like, you probably don't even want me around, like, whatever. Maybe you should kick me out. He's like, what's wrong with, like, how are you this hard on yourself, But anyway, I guess my point was, like, even people of the highest caliber, we probably don't evaluate ourselves very well. And maybe that's okay. That's how you get better. I mean, that's how you become Michael Brecker. That's how you become Coltrane.
That's how you do it. I mean, and that's what I was telling. I'm like coaching the student through the process. I'm like, the first time you're going to listen to yourself, you're going to be like, why the hell do I play this instrument? I should quit. I should burn this and just go work at McDonald's. That's just not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's, but it's that feedback has to, and that input that we're getting that's completely objective, the tape literally coming back into our face or whichever the sound, and then we can analyze that, is the psychological game that you have to play. Is like, okay, I'm not doing this to destroy my own playing. I'm doing this to find the weak points and get better at it.
Sure.
You're like, okay, I can do this better. And then you play it, and then it takes the one time where you fix it, where you catch it, in your playing and go, ha, you listen to it back and it was there and it was exactly what that, and it begins to bring a real perspective to it.
Sure. It also shows you why, like, having a master teacher who's around you hearing you do it, and when they say, like, whoa, stop, what was that? Like, what were you doing? Like, what happened there? Like, what were you thinking? Like, were you not in the moment or whatever? Like, how did you do that? And it's not because you're being a jerk. It's because you're saying, because they can hear what you would have heard in the recording. So when you hear the recording back, you're like, oh,
yeah, yep.
Like, I get that they really did. They weren't being a jerk. Like, they actually heard something that I'm hearing now. For some reason, I couldn't hear in the moment.
Yeah, it's like learning how to see certain things in any type of field, like knowing having that feedback one by your instructor, or two by like video playback. It's like why sports teams watch videos to be like, this is where we screwed up. You need that external thing to be. Otherwise, you just don't know. Or you might know because you get clobbered or whatever. But at the same time, it's not as much as being like that's where that fault is. It's kind of like they're bringing it around to the who's the physicist you keep mentioning, the quantum
Richard
guy.
Feynman.
Yeah, the anti-government guy, was that him or was it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
partly because he was on the Manhattan Project, and
I know. But I'm just trying to get a point of reference. Anti-government. Hey, all right, I remember that much. So like with him learning the rocket science, it's like you got to show up and you have to just sit there, ask the stupid questions, and once you get those basics, you keep asking more questions.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of man, we're like on all cylinders right now. But when we're when you practice, how many times do you go back and be like, ugh, it's like a foundation, like fundamental thing. You're like, I never sorted that thing out because I was thinking about this thing over here, and I never fixed this thing first.
Yeah,
when I should have, and now here it is haunting me. Mm-hmm. And even if you did figure it out at one point, but you kind of forgot about like maintaining it or whatever, now you got to go back and fix it again. And you're like, why do my quarter notes suck? Or something. It's like, I cannot play a C major triad or something. Like why doesn't this? It's like you have to like keep all that like fundamental stuff sorted.
Yeah,
I don't think I sent it to you, but there's this cool video that somebody took it's only like a minute and a half long of Charlie Parker like warming up before an interview or something. And it's just cool like to hear him. But it's also, he's one of those people like he could play a C major scale and you'll start crying. You'd be like, oh my, that's like the most beautiful thing you've ever heard. And he's just like, da, 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 da. And you're like, God, that was the hippest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's just like he like nails it in a way. Like like you could tell that he always worked on fundamentals. Mm-hmm. Like it's funny, they actually, somebody did a video. What is it? Sharp 11. You ever seen those videos?
No.
It's a YouTube guy. He does these like in-depth videos. He did like a 20-minute video about this minute and a half clip. And it's just like, like here's Charlie like getting ready for the thing, and he plays like major scales, ascending by half step or whatever. But it sounds like so cool. Like it sounds so good. It's like, it's because like he spent so much time just honing those fundamentals. Yep. That it's like you can't get away from it. No matter what, you could try to like work on all kinds of the hippest, coolest 12-tone whatever thing, but you can never escape the need to work on fundamentals. Yeah. I don't know how we got here exactly, but
either way, no, we got here because we were talking about tapes and recording and improving and fundamentals. The tapes, like, and that's the other thing too. I think the reason why the tapes are so useful and so catastrophic to your ego if you're using them right is that they have no problem showing you where your fundamentals are garbage. Like, it has zero problems being like, yeah, those things where you're talking about like fretting and everything, you suck at that. You got to fix that. It's like, God. And so you go back and you do, but it's great because, I think that part of the reason why you get wired into music and just get obsessed with it is that there's always something new to tweak and get better. It never ends. Like there's nobody that's like, I've perfected it, I'm just not going to do anything. Even then they still keep cracking at it. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, what if I just do this?
So I saw somebody, this kid was interviewing Sonny Rollins. I don't know if you know Sonny Rollins. Yeah. Like one of the greatest tenor sax players ever, blah, blah, blah. And the kid was like, so once you mastered blah, 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 blah. And Sonny's like, no, wait, like you never master anything. Like he's like, I haven't mastered anything. And he's like in his 80s now. He still plays great. But anyway, it was like, to your point, it's like you can't ever, you don't ever master it. Yeah, well, because it's one of the annoying things about being human. So we're just not... But even it's like, what would that even mean? Like, even if you were a computer, Like, could you master the major scale? I don't know. Like,
Well,
probably
it's a
not.
question of like what is mastery, which is
Yeah,
a whole
right.
different.
So that's a whole,
What
yeah.
is playing the sequence of notes? Is it playing the secret note sequence of notes with like certain inflections? Is it musicality? Is it rhythm? Is it all of them combined? At which point does it
Sure,
become something?
it's all of it, right?
It's all of it, and
Yeah, and
it's like
you start adding all these qualifiers to it, and that qualifier list is millions of things, maybe, right? It's like
yeah,
you could never get at all of them.
and that's just part of it, though. It's one of I think it's almost like it's a paradox because the deeper you go in, the bigger it gets. You know, like you're not hitting the bottom. The lake is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger the further you go down that particular swimming hole, and it's that's the fun thing about it. You know,
Oh,
it's
sure.
like the more you get into it, it's like, good lord, the amount of and I think for myself now, I'm beginning to see things that I've never seen before in my
Sure.
own playing, other people sing, and that's just from keeping at it. You know, it's like I can watch things and be like, oh, like he did this slight change with the hand, or that's how his grip is, and that's doing that, and that's producing this sound, and that kind of sound I like. Well, I didn't like what he did there, but I like this other thing, and his sensitivity for these things. How do you get that sensitive? Like, how do you completely keep certain dynamic levels separated with your hands, and
Sure.
where are you pulling from to get louder? It's like I think I've discovered another spot on my guitar to raise the volume in the sense of like where I can play to get louder and
Sure.
a hand angle with that. And I've had that guitar for 15 years, you know.
Yeah, that reminded me. I was playing my Eastman, which is a hollow body guitar, and this hand when it rests on the top, right? It's like controlling the pressure that you put on the top of the guitar, and just the way that affects the sound.
Yep.
And
I mean, that's what I got
it's
the
like,
arm
gosh,
at.
it's like you have all these other little intricacies you're paying attention to, and now it's like, oh, I really was, because I mostly played solid bodies, so I wasn't
Yeah.
even really paying attention to that. And when I play classical, I almost always play with my finger picking style, so my arm's in a different place than when I'm picking, so it's not pressing on the top like when I was picking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so it's like all these little things you gotta like pay attention to. Yeah, you just keep learning more. You're like, okay, well now I got to pay attention to how much forearm pressure I'm putting on the top, and maybe I need to adjust my posture a little bit to make it so I can do certain things or whatever. Yes, it's fascinating.
Well, like one of the things that I've been focusing on now was I watched the David Russell masterclass because, but he was teaching
Moron.
some. Yeah, there's a meme. I meant to send it to you, but it's got a picture of David Russell, and it says, "See, you have two problems: your left hand and your right hand." I was like, "Oh, that's great." It's like, yes, that's amazing. Anyways, but he was talking about like because I've been paying attention to more on the string noise aspect of my playing and just trying to get it as silent as possible and as clean as.
Yeah.
And that's just freaking good lord. It's like I might as well just go back to playing rock guitar. I mean, no offense to rock guitarists, whichever. Like just like
Yeah,
moving
no,
around.
it's really interesting on nylon string because you're like, when you lift your fingers, if you slide a little bit because you're
Yeah.
going to your next spot, you hear that like, right?
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well now, how do you get rid of that? Well, then you got to lift straight up, move your hand, but not too far away from the strings because it's like,
Yeah, you don't want
all
to
this
be
little
like,
and maybe it's
yeah.
only one finger, but you got to lift that finger like straight up and then move it.
or does
It's
it matter of
fascinating.
holding a chord and moving a finger to catch a melodic note? Because
Yeah.
you'll push like a bass string and you'll get some string noise. I notice that when I'm working up the project that we're working on now, and it's because it's so spacious. The string noise thing is like punching me in the.
Blaring. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, I suck. But one of the things that he was talking about in terms of noise from nails, this is the one thing that I picked up from the masterclass, and the other thing I'm working on. But he's like, the only reason, or not the only reason, but he's like, one of the big contributing reasons to or nail click is tension in the fingers. He's like, you gotta let them relax, just relax. So, and it's this weird thing of learning to let go and trusting your fingers to play it. But as soon as I started to do that, it was like poof. It's significantly less than it was. It happens occasionally, where before it was like I was noticing it
Sure.
more common than I would like. And now it's just like
that
even
reminds
with
me. That's like that thing where you know, when you have a pick, but it's the same with a nail. It's like how fast you go through the string. Actually, you know, if you go real fast, it makes the string go louder, right? Because you're putting more kinetic energy into the string. But that doesn't mean you have to press harder. Like,
yes,
it's faster, but it's not harder. And that's a really tricky sort of thing to learn.
Yes, it is. It's staying in that relaxed state where you're letting your...
It's not like muscling it. You're not like, I'm going to rip these strings off. It's just moving faster. You move your finger faster, and it gets louder.
I mean, that's one of the things, like practicing dynamics. Like, what is my mezzo forte compared to my mezzo piano, compared to my fortissimo? Like, what do I consider that sitting on the other side of a microphone, and then going back and watching it? And can I replicate that with another recording? Can I sit down and go, oh, I'm going to do it again? You know, is that going to be the same? Is it different? How is it stepwise? Those are all things to kind of consider, because it just, that consistency of those small details is what separates the masters up to another thing. It's like, I remember that distinctly when I watched Jason Vio. He has a video of him playing the 998 in a church, with this incredible church. You know, it's a great room, swimming in reverb, gorgeous recording. And then he played the same piece at the Tiny Desk concert on NPR.
Okay.
And he played it the exact same way. You know, so it's like he's letting all these notes kind of hang in a dead space at the NPR studios versus where it would. But it struck me, I'm like, that's intentional. He's always playing it the exact same way. He's not changing a dynamic thing because he's in a new space. He just happens to be playing that. And that's one of the things that's like, well, how am I practicing in order to build in that level of consistency with that? I'm not saying that I always do it, but it's just one of those things that become that I become aware of as I'm playing. It's like, what level of where am I at consistency? Is there consistency in just hitting the notes? Is my consistency in hitting the phrase with dynamics and shaping? Is my consistency in my finger? Like, how do I keep that consistency up? Because you don't get to perform at a certain level and not have all those things be at a constant. So it's really kind of involved with that detail thing. And that's, you know, it's like during the school semester when things get busy, it always drives me nuts. It's like I can't just sit there. But,
what's funny, so when you first learning guitar, or when you first started learning like that, I don't know, let's just say intermediate stage, where you're like, oh, the melody note should be louder than the other notes. And that's kind of a big deal for a while, where you're like, wow, how do you make one note louder than the other ones? Because at that up to that point, you've made every note sound the same. And that was a goal, right? Was just to even like, I want some consistency. And then you realize, oh, wait, part of that is making one of those notes stick out. But then you have the next level where it's like, well, the middle notes actually should be quieter than the bass note or whatever. Or maybe they're louder than the bass note. Or maybe the second note's loud. And then now you have like 4 different notes, and they all have 4 different dynamic ranges. And on top of that, the bass note, because it's on the low E string, actually sticks out more because of blah, blah, blah. You know, like you start to get in all these like little like traps, especially on classical guitar, where it's like, man, you got to remember you can't hit the E string as hard as you would the D string, even though like you're doing some kind of contrapuntal bass thing or something, and you're switching between those strings, but the D string, to have the same volume, actually has to be hit a little bit harder than the E string. That's like all these little like very infinitesimal things, but the end result of the thing that you're hearing is it just sounds better.
Yeah, no, exactly.
You'd be like, okay, these 2 players are playing. They're both, let's say, in time. They both have fairly good tone, but this sounds more musical than this one. And then on top of that, it's like, well, dynamics are funny because they're not very interesting if they stay the same. So if that middle note was supposed to be at this volume, it really needs to do this kind of thing because it has a little line of its own.
Yeah.
and the other line's going down like this. It's like you start to have like you have 4 lines. They all have their own little independent dynamic things that's happening. I'm picking 4 because we're guitar players, and much more than 4 is practically impossible. But
okay.
but anyway, it's like, and even on piano that's practically impossible. But it's like you have these 4 notes moving, and like they're all have their own little independent things going, and it really does sound better for I don't know, whatever magical reason, that melodies sound better when they're actually doing dynamic things and whatever, and if you have 4 independent. But anyway, what a fascinating thing. You just like keep getting like more and more into those little intricacies.
That's the thing that I notice when I revisit older pieces, like sitting down and playing them. I'm like, see this line back then, because I just didn't know what to look for. You know, in one sense, it's almost like we appreciate aesthetic beauty through our eyes without even thinking about it, because it just kind of like hits us.
Yeah.
But like we don't sit there and go, well, that's shading into this, and that's doing this, and that's going this. You know, those are things that you think about way afterwards. And it's the same
if you went back to analyze it, right?
And it's the same thing that's going on with high level music of playing. The player might be thinking about that, and they clearly are if that's coming across. But that at the moment you're not totally in that space of, oh, well, this is shaping like that. I mean, I kind of am. And I think every musician, just like every artist, when they look at a landscape, is probably going, oh, well, that's this color here, and that's coming off, or this is how to replicate that in type of a painting. And musicians doing the same thing when they're listening to music, like, oh, okay, these things are going that way. And so you notice more, but that's the world that you live in. But, you know, if I was going to like take off my analytical hat, which is difficult to do, but take that off and just kind of like listen to a particular thing, you get the beauty of it coming through without knowing the detail of it. It's just kind of there. And you can totally tell the difference. It's like the Portland, the Portsmouth Sinfonia versus a real orchestra.
Sure.
For those that don't know, am I saying it right? Is that the right one? The world's, and I got to look this up because it's funny.
I think I've heard of it. Sounds familiar, but I don't know what it is.
It is an experiment.
Is it like a player orchestra kind of thing?
Yes, but you cannot be playing the instrument that you have played. So it's basically like, it means that if you're a flutist, you have to go in and play violin. Like you cannot play an instrument that you're.
Oh, so it's not a machine; it's people that are going in. Okay.
It's people. It's a social experiment. It started in like 1970, and it's awful. I mean, if you look up the world's worst orchestra, it's them, and it's like it's laugh out loud crying bad. Okay, and they do it like with all these orchestral hits, you know, like they do 2001 Thus Spake Zarathustra, you know, and like all these big things that are in the classical world that everybody can recognize. Like even if you don't know the name, you're like, oh yeah, that song. And they just like, they play it, and they have a conductor, and they don't rehearse. Like there are no rehearsals. They sit down, they get the music, and they go. I'm laughing just because it's like so bad. Like they're hit that da 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 da, and it's just like the most, it is the most awful thing that you've heard, and it's hysterical. But it's like comparing them to like the Cleveland Orchestra or the New York Philharmonic or whatever, the London Philharmonic.
I was wondering if you were gonna go with. Well, I don't know the level of players that are going there, but if you had like Cleveland Orchestra level players go there, and then but had them switch instruments, would the notes maybe be wrong, but like the aesthetical things be good because they just have like a appreciation for dynamics and tonal color, and even if they don't really know the instrument, they sort of like, oh, this makes this sound, this makes that sound. So I think it's kind of. It'd be sort of interesting to find out.
Well, I think, of course, because there's some fundamental rules of music that transfer between instruments. You're going to take in, like, if I do this harder, it's going to get louder. If I do this softer, it's going to get quieter. And these are the notes that are okay. There's a basic layout, and it kind of goes from there.
It'd be interesting to find out in that experiment if those things were still strong, maybe the intonation and notes. Yeah, if the intonation and all that stuff is really bad.
Not so much on the intonation. Not so much. That was hysterical. Like you take the time, look them up, listen to the albums as much as you can stomach, or have a nice scotch and sit there and enjoy your evening, just laughing your head off.
I'm fascinated by that. I didn't even know this. I thought you were going somewhere else with this.
No.
I was thinking of like a player orchestra or something.
No,
like the equivalent of a player piano as an orchestra.
Oh no! I was going with the terrible one that I know of that's popular and you can get their albums, versus the accomplished ones. So it's so bad. There's no other way to put it. The Portsmouth Symphonia. Portsmouth Sinfonia.
Oh.
It's okay. I'm playing.
The anesthesiologist.
I'm playing it real quick so everybody's gonna.
I know. I was looking it up on here. I was gonna put.
Yeah. So here we go. It's coming through. Can you hear any of that?
Hey, they got that note at least.
The timpani is like so hard. Oh my god. Oh my god.
That's pretty modern, hip sound.
Oh my god. Anyways, like that.
Well, now that we have no more listeners.
Yeah, they all ran like crazy. Oh my god. But yeah, that was good God. I was crying. It's just so funny. They do a ton of stuff like just in the Hall of the Mountain King.
So how did we get here again?
We got here because we follow rabbit holes, and that's we got here because of comparing things and talking about musicality and the details. But either way, it was a fun arrival. That was definitely that's a highlight. Speaking of highlights, we have hit 1,000 listens, so we got that going for us.
Sure, more than that, yeah.
Yeah, we're more than that now, but it happened when we were taking a small break there. And so that's pretty exciting. We have 37 episodes, so that's roughly 30.
Yeah, and that's not counting YouTube, actually, too. So.
Oh, sweet. So another 70. Yay. No, I don't know how that.
So we have 1,002.
So you're saying there's a chance. We have 1,002. We've had some awesome times in terms of interviews. Like our first official one was the
Spectacle?
Spectacle culture. Spectacle
Man,
culture.
if you've made it this far in this podcast and you haven't listened to the spectacle culture thing with Mark,
yeah, you got to check that out.
That was just the most fascinating interview.
Yep.
Man, we got to revisit that at some point.
Yeah, we're gonna have a part 2. We already talked about doing a part 2, so we got to do that. Then we had the Spherical.
So by the way, if you don't know, that was a PhD in sociology came on and we talked about the spectacle.
Because he
if that's not fascinating enough as a topic, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean that was like just skimming the surface. Now we're gonna start talking about that, and we should just have him back on and do another interview.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
And then Spherical Agenda a couple of times.
We had Brandon Coleman on.
Yep.
And then we had Jim Marron on.
Jim Marron. Yep.
And then we had Spectacles
Spherical Agenda.
Spherical Agenda. Sorry.
Which, by the way, shameless plug, the album drops tomorrow. I can't freaking wait. I have been counting down days for this thing to come
just
out.
monster band, monster musicians. If you're in Cincinnati, sorry, they actually sold out their CD release show.
That's awesome. That's great.
I just saw that this morning or this afternoon, I think, which is tomorrow. I think isn't it tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow. Oh. Yep. So Jim Marron and then Neil Zaza.
Neil Zaza, which was amazing. Yeah,
that was amazing. His album's coming out shortly too.
Nice. And I imagine he's doing the Christmas thing too.
Yeah, they're doing One Silent Night. They just did One Dark Night, and that was supposedly really cool. I didn't have a chance to go.
So if you're in the Cleveland, Akron area, Northeast Ohio, One Silent Night, go check that out.
And then we had Spherical Agenda after that, I think.
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And then then we had our best one with Matt. Like that episode was
Matt Hollenberg. Yeah, that was our most popular episode by far. The 2 episodes. Yeah. and just fascinating because he's just a ridiculous musician.
Yeah, it's like reasons why I am not successful. Guys like him exist. So not just that, but we
got into such deep conversation too, just
about creativity and
being a musician, like the
pushing the boundaries,
sort of dark side of it too, and fascinating. So if you haven't checked that out, man, you will. I think that's one of those things you listen to and it sort of changes you.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Can't help but be changed.
Yep,
fascinating.
And then and that was that wasn't our last interview. We had Heather with the
Heather Malyuk. Yeah. So audiology stuff, that was cool. Man.
That was really cool. That would be another one. And then I think Matt was our last in terms of time order.
Maybe. Yeah.
We have a couple more coming up that
we haven't done we could do so many more.
Yeah. Probably. We'll stick that for season 2, which is coming. This is the season 1 break, so it's going to be sporadic, and we'll get. It'll probably just be me and Tim, and we'll save the interviews for when we're officially back to our weekly schedule, the podcast. But with the holidays coming up and semester ending and so on, we're just kind of going to do filler stuff and go from there. I mean, this has been a blast, though. This is at least.
I mean, we've waited almost a year.
It'll be a year in January.
Yeah.
So, which is crazy.
It's crazy. That's cool.
Keep it up and get playing and get these projects off the ground. A whole lot of recording over the breaks coming up.
Yeah. So you have your plan for April 15th release date, which is coming up quickly.
Okay. Yep. But I started into learning it today, and realized that's when I was like, oh God, I just freaking squeak all over the place. What is my problem? So I'm going to admit it now. I bought cheater strings for the recording just to see how they are. They have polished classical strings. And I'm like, let's see how the basses are with that. So I grabbed a set. We'll see if it actually makes a difference or not. It should, but God only knows. And then what was the other thing? No, just working up the project, really. And that's started into that today officially. It was like, all right, I had my gig, so all that I'm keeping that material because this new material for the album is also going to be part of my set. So it's like, okay, I'm into the whole juggling pieces type of thing. It's like, revisit that today and revisit this and learn.
So do you think, just for simplicity's sake, are you going to record at your house, or are you thinking about going somewhere?
I'm going back and forth. I think if I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to bring my own equipment, but I really need somebody on the other end of on the laptop. That's my biggest thing that hangs me up even with home recording, is that I'm great at getting phenomenal tone from other people's playing. I suck at doing it for my own. And I think it's because it's like I have to sit down, get up, play back, listen.
Yeah, move. Then you move too much. Yeah, right.
And then I move too much, and then it's like, the consistency thing. So I'm on the edge of loving and hating it. It's like, yeah, that sounds God, it's just not as good as I got this other guy's tone. And, so I'm always comparing to other recordings that I've done. And it's like, there can't be 2 of me. So I need to find somebody that is willing to either trade off, like they'll sit on one side and I'll sit on the other. I've had friends do that before, and it's worked, but none of them have been sound engineers to the degree of like myself for classical. So it's been like, I'd say like out of a scale of 0 to 100, it'd be like 80, 85, where I want that 100, for my own sound. And getting that is going to be notoriously difficult with just myself. So we'll see how that goes. I have a couple of people in mind that I might just throw money at just to get it done. You sit there, do this. And I need, it's not only that, but I also need somebody that can read music and speak the lingo efficiently. And I had that with the other two guys. They were like, yeah, you might want to take that phrase a little bit better. And so that was really helpful. But it'd be great to get a package of them all in one. It'd be like, yeah, that was cool. Now let's actually play it with music type of thing. So that's that. So having that scheduling I'll probably end up just doing it at home and calling it a wrap, just making it easier. I might do the math. I might send it out for mastering, and mixing is relatively easy, but the mastering is something, or it'll be a different thing. Though I have all the software, it's just a matter of getting into it.
Sure.
Go from there, and that'll be it. I'm really excited for the 3 interviews that we have set up. One of them you've heard about rumors of this person throughout, so that's why we want to kind of kick off the second season with that particular interview being like, ooh, who's this? You've heard the rumors of this man and the damage that he is, and
the legend. Yeah,
the legend. Now it's time to meet him. So we'll just leave that, and then
so he can scold us on how bad we're doing our podcast.
Exactly. What are you doing? Why am I here? This is wasting my time. Tell me when you're better.
Yeah.
Tell me when you're better.
I know you thought that was a good intro.
Yep. So that'll be great, and I'm looking forward to that. And going, I booked an official gig at Kenyon in March, like the end of March. So that's going to be my official, not album debut in the sense of selling the album, but performance debut of the pieces. So I needed to set a goal to really, really help motivate it. And
yeah, sure.
The nice thing is I do get a small stipend, so it's not completely useless. But it also builds the studio and builds the school's reputation. So that's the point. So which also puts more pressure on me to actually play it well. Go figure.
Well, I think part of this experiment too is that it doesn't end on the first. So the first record is only the start of it, right? It's like you got to do like 3 or 4 more of those to make it worthwhile, right?
I already have an idea for the second project. It's been cooking in the back of my head for years. So it's like, yeah, now I have a reason to do it. If I do 6 songs, that's plenty to keep me busy with that.
Sure.
I've already started doing some arranging on them slightly, like getting skeletal structures, because this first project's done in terms of the arranging. It's just a matter of learning to play it really well. The simple part. So
yeah, and I was saying I announced to the world what my plan was, and so I also put it out there sort of like to gain interest in it, and so I've had a few people. I'm thinking that the first project, in some ways mine's trickier because I have to get other people to play on it.
Yeah,
and it's
kind of stuck like that.
So I could do everything myself, I guess. I've thought about that too a little bit, but it's nice getting a real drummer to play instead of me writing drum programs, for instance. So anyway, I got to start moving on that quick. I think that I guess what I was going to say is the first version of this, the first record, I'm kind of opening it up to the world of people that I know. They don't have to be in the area and it be a gigging sort of thing. But I'm hoping what happens is that I do the 3 or 4 songs for it, and then I have a record for it, and then I can create a local group that plays it. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway,
good idea. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, it's coming up quick.
Yeah.
Quick.
Thank you to all of the 1,002 people that have listened to the podcast. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. It's great to see that it's like, some people are taking interest, and the interactions, that we've gotten in terms of comments have been great, just to kind of interact with that. And it's encouraging. Plus it gives us ideas of things to do. So if you have ideas for different podcasts or topics, shout them out, comment, leave a like or whatever, that spiel of things is just to give us more ideas. I mean, not that we can't ramble about just about anything, but it's nice to have some degree of focus.
Sure.
And that'll kind of like go from there. So
yeah, and especially if there's like a type of interview that you were like, oh man, if you could get another sociologist or like there's a few other people, I'm gonna leave the names out, that are not musicians. Well, I was gonna say that's not their primary occupation. That we're trying to get on as well. So I think there's some pretty cool potential interviews too, of all aspects of guitaring. So
very cool. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. We'll be sporadic till after the new year for sure. And then we're going to hit everything full force, metal explosion. So, boom. Peace out.
Later.